good evening to you, Grenada, Carriacou, Petite Martinique, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. To you, wherever you are, a wonderful Monday. Good evening to you. We say thanks for being part of this conversation. Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm your host, Joseph Cadore, and I want to say thanks for allowing us into your living rooms, wherever you are. Those of you on GBN Television, Channel 7, Channel 11, Channel 20 if you're in cable, or those of you that's on Classic 105.5, 105.9, or you're following us via our Facebook feed or via our webpage at www.gbn.gd. We say thanks for being part of this evening's conversation. There's so many events that have come to interrupt and have brought tears to our eyes. We've been through the drama of COVID, the pandemic as it is, but in more recent times we've had to deal with as a nation the unfortunate death of young Bell from Woburn. And it's an incident, no doubt, that has left a lot more questions than answers. It has left family in mourning and the nation asking questions. And certainly this evening we bring the conversation beyond the headlines to delve into the what, the when, the where, the why. What are the lessons, gentlemen, that can be learned from this rather unfortunate boating incident that took place? I want to say thanks and good evening to my guest that's joining me. I'll first start with the lone carrier that is joining us remotely. That's Lararus Joseph, and he's a senior supervisor in the Maritime Department and a senior marine pilot. With me in studio to my immediate left is the man Theophilus Bethel. He's a certified marine captain in the industry since 2001. Comes with a whole host of experience under his belt. Sitting next to him, sandwiched in the middle, I dare say, is the man Donal Kavanagh, and he's the owner of a Sea Safety Service Limited, which is a specialist marine safety company involved in the supply and servicing of marine life and saving and fire equipment. And also with us is the man that's going to connect all of this together, make sense of it as we embrace technology and we move into the 21st century. Mr. Keith Ashby of the Caribbean Coding Academy. Gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Good evening.
Good evening. Glad to be here. Good evening.
Good evening. I know it is, most of us, we are fully aware as to the incidents that have traversed, has made its way into the public domain. There has been a lot of conversation that has happened. And I want to start the conversation with you, Lararus. When we hear the conversation or questions being asked about safety at sea, is there a textbook from which we can read, a manual that we can follow to ask ourselves these questions? What exactly comes to mind when that conversation comes up, Lararus? Safety at sea.
Joe and the listening public and viewing public and my fellow participants. For me, safety at sea has 4 pillars. I would say regulations, a safety culture, the government industry partnership, and enforcement. And I say that because there is a regulatory regime for ships internationally. Ships are regulated through national administrations, which is termed the flag state. And as ships are moving pieces of territory, they go into different countries. The port of which it goes into becomes the port state, and as they traverse from port to port, they are invariably in coastal state territory. So there is an enforcement regime, and the standards are harmonized globally. The regulations are produced by the International Maritime Organization, and state parties to these conventions are required to put them into the national law. So there's a uniform application of all IMO rules and standards throughout the world.
So it is fair to say that there's a standard playing field or a standard open sea when it comes to what is done on the ocean in terms of maritime vessels.
Yes, there is, and you have freedom of navigation, but there's also rules and regulations that mariners and ship owners have to comply with. Because at the end of the day, a ship is part of the global supply chain. There is no demand as such for shipping. There's a demand for the movements of goods and services. So it is a derived demand, and as such, it is subject to economic and social and political regulations and standards.
You made mention of Lazarus, the issue of safety. What are some of those protocols that comes to mind immediately?
Well, the most important of all the conventions is what we call SOLAS, the Safety of Life at Sea Convention. And that came about, sadly, after the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, and it has been revised ever since. The SOLAS is incorporated somewhat in our National Shipping Act, which is Cap 247, Cap 303, sorry. So that piece of convention is all about safety of life at sea. It deals with ship construction standards, it deals with firefighting, it deals with ship operations in port and at sea. And the other important pieces of legislation also, MARPOL, the Marine Pollution Convention, that is important for the preservation of the marine environment. Grenada is also a state party to the MARPOL Convention. Then we have the standard of training and certification for watchkeeping officers, STCW. That regulates the qualifications and experiences required for seafarers, officers, and ratings. Then you have the Load Line Convention. That regulates how ships are supposed to be loaded in a safe manner. And then you have the Tonnage Convention. Again, all these conventions are ratified by Grenada, and as such, it is incorporated somewhat in the Shipping Act. Then because we have a peculiar shipping situation in the Caribbean, where a lot of our ships that does trade into Ireland are what we call below convention size, because most of the convention, particularly SOLAS, starts at 500 gross tonnage and above. MARPOL is 400 gross tonnage. STCW applies to all ships on international voyage. So, but in the main, most of the conventions are for the larger ship. Noting that the International Maritime Organization, in concert with national administrations, came up with 2 codes of safety, which are supposed to be somewhat of an equivalent standard to the major conventions. We have the Caribbean Cargo Ship Safety Code, which applies to all cargo ships and tankers of less than 500 gross ton. And we have another one, the Small Commercial Vessel Code, which applies to passenger and cargo ships of less than 24 meters to 5 meters length overall. And that takes care of the smaller vessels that are not that are below 24 meters and greater than 5 meters in length.
Okay, we're going to get back to you, Lazarus, because I know you're loaded with information, but we do not want to lose the general public. Bethel, listen to Lazarus. There's a rule book that is out there that all marine operators are expected to play by, a standard rule book. And certainly, as a man of your experience, he talks about certification and training. I'm assuming you would agree quite readily with what Lazarus has to say.
What Lazarus just said, I totally endorsed it 100%. But pertaining to the rule book, it's a book they call Rules of the Roads that follows all the laws, I should say. How you maneuver on the water top, the lights, the day shapes, night shapes. So all mariners should and shall, at all times, go by that book.
For a man
once they start navigating on the water top.
For a man that has been in the industry for that many years, what are some of the takeaways, some of the things that resonates with you from being out in the open ocean?
Wow. I would honestly say some things that go about how you see things reacting, not only in Grenada, but all over the world. I think if we try our best to implement these rules and go by them, everything should be more safe.
If so I'm getting the sense that very often
it does not apply.
Is that good or bad?
Very much bad. Very much bad.
And I guess for you,
and I think the authorities, after this incident, the authorities will look into it.
And certainly we don't want to preempt the investigation. We know the authorities, they're going to do what they have to do.
Exactly.
But from your point of view, as an experienced mariner, you've seen, you've had the experience, as you said, of that moving tide as it relates to the rule book that's not applied to. What would you personally want to see come out of this? If any one thing.
The knowledge of seafarers, that's the most important thing. How they go about navigating the waters. And that should be on a safe way. Follow the rules of the road, navigate the correct way. Publish your lights, your shapes.
Break it down for us. Lights, shapes, you get in it.
That is, each vessel has the navigational lights, which is port, which is starboard side. That is how we identify other vessels in the night, or well, daytime it's fairly clear, other than when there's storm, when there's squalls, fogs. But at the set time, in the night, we produce lights also.
Talking about the lights, and I'm assuming as an important element to safety on sea, Mr. Kavanagh, is equipment and other necessary things that's needed to be on board.
Yeah, very much so. What my colleague Captain Bethel has referred to quite rightly is what we generally call the call regs or collision. It's essentially the highway code for the sea. And as he has alluded to, it is a set of rules that you must obey in order to be safe. So you show lights, you show specific shapes, and specific actions that you take. For example, if two boats are meeting head on, which way each boat will turn, etc. So it even goes down to what actions you should take in the event you get into a close quarters situation or a potential collision situation. And in terms of equipment on board, apart from lights and shapes, pyrotechnics are a very, very effective piece of equipment to have on board. We're basically talking about marine flares because it can signal the location of a vessel. It's a very almost violent situation. It's very visible. It's very, very bright. And one of the points that we should remember when we speak about collision regulations is that almost a different set of rules will apply during the day than apply at night. During the day we look for shapes, at night we look for lights, but we also need to be mindful of, reducing speed at night and watchkeeping. Watchkeeping is vitally important.
What is watchkeeping?
Watchkeeping is making sure that any vessel that's underway at night has a watchkeeper, a person who is actively watching out for obstructions, other boats, rocks or reefs or things like that. It's basic safety standards that allows mariners to operate safely during the day and at night.
So there's the watchkeepers, Mr. Ashby, and then you can well appreciate there is the question of the introduction of technology, which is down your line. That certainly would agree that the marine industry has come to embrace full-heartedly, and that would definitely bring a smile to your face.
To a certain extent, I think one of the reasons why we at the Academy looked at what's going on currently is that we noticed that there are persons currently at sea, right, that are not, when we sort of did a survey, we found that there are some persons who has their license has expired, and they could not, they said, when we had a close interview with some of the seafarers, they said to us, well, I did it in 2001. And it has expired, but I'm operational. And he said, I don't know where I cannot. I have to make a living, so I cannot take time out of my regular livelihood to go get my license renewed and stuff like that. So we realized that in terms of upskilling our personnel. So that's one of the reasons why we have collaborated with Captain Bethel, because he, one of the things that we have to commend him. He's one of the guys that travels the whole Caribbean, certifying persons all over the Caribbean. And he is from P.T. Martin. He's our local person. And I said, so how could our guy go all over the Caribbean, all over the world certifying people, and our people are struggling to get their certification? So for years I pursued him to see if we can get to do this on island.
Lazarus, let me take the conversation back to you from the perspective of the port authorities and your role that you play. The concern, we're getting a general concern because as part of your initial delivery, you made reference to culture. And I think culture has quite an important element into this conversation. You did say there are rules that governs ships of larger tonnage and so. But let's take the conversation home in terms of where we live the way we live. Our lives is on the sea. You go to Carriacou, Petit Martinique in particular, where literally they jump on the speedboats the same way we jump on a mini bus to go from point A to point B. And the question is there any regulations to add to that, Lazarus?
Yeah, well, Joe, I'll backtrack a bit. I endorse also the views of my colleagues on the importance of the international regulations for the prevention of collision at sea. I didn't want to delve into it because I don't want that conversation reach to a point where we have to discuss an ongoing investigation. That being said, it is important that mariners at sea follow the prescribed rules of the road, and there is one rule that stands out in my mind, and that is Rule 2, the responsibility of vessels. You know, it says nothing in these rules shall construe the failure to abide by the rules, and a vessel may make a departure of the rules necessary to avoid immediate danger. It is a legal provision, but all it says in a nutshell is that you have to do whatever is necessary to avoid collision at sea. All right, so moving on to the question. In terms of regulations, as I mentioned before, we have Cap 303, which is the Shipping Act. The Shipping Act really prescribes what is required for ship registration, dealing with seamen's issues at sea, repatriation, the host of maritime issues that you will encounter in international shipping. There's also the Powercraft Act, Cap 249, which requires all power-driven vessels, and power-driven vessel is described as vessels propelled by machinery, to be registered by the Director of Maritime Affairs. The Maritime Directorate sits within the Ports Authority, but the officers of the Maritime Administration are appointed by the minister responsible for shipping. So there is regulations for the licensing and regulation of all powercraft. There are some exceptions, but in the main, all powercraft are required to be licensed by the Director of Maritime Affairs.
Smaller fishing units, what conversations, touches and concerns their operations?
Well, for some fishing boats, the Act exempts them because they are at the moment registered and licensed by the Fisheries Department. However, as I said before, the Maritime Administration is the umbrella body for all maritime matters in the state of Grenada.
And we must say that I know, I don't want to get a date in mind, but only recently I know the Fisheries Department, they did complete their licensing cycle. Was in February? Was it Lazarus, if my memory serves me right?
Yeah, they usually do it early in the year, yeah.
Right, and I know, and there was the appeal to all fishing vessels, ensure you go out. But I think one of the things that came to the fore quite evidently is that culture of us gentlemen, persons and people not wanting to abide by the rule that governs what. I think the same way there's a culture of what happens on our nation's roads, there's also that challenge of what happens on the sea. And of course, certainly we must want the viewing public to appreciate that this is in no way casting aspersions as to what may or may not have happened in that specific incident regarding the young man from Woburn. The conversation tonight is seeking to highlight and identify some of the shortcomings in the industry and how we can deal with that. With that being said, when we come back, we'll delve into other units like the Coast Guard. What are the rules that applies to them in terms of equipment, security, training, and so that conversation continues when we come back right here on Beyond the Headlines as we look at safety at sea. We'll be right back.
Prosperity really matters to you. Come home to Grenada Cooperative Bank. Since 1932, we have shared the same values: financial diligence, investing with prudence, transparent compliance, consistent performance.
Welcome home, Grenada.
No matter the economic climb, we always stand the test of time.
Welcome home, Grenada, the bank that goes the extra mile. Welcome home, Grenada, the bank that serves with a smile.
Welcome to a bank you can truly call your own. Grenada Cooperative Bank.
We care because you matter.
Co-op Bank. Welcome home.
Hey man, when we come online, you only juking up the phone.
Yeah boy, now as I say, they have an app. I can't find it. I check Play Store. I do a Google search. I can't find it. Man, I get fed up, man.
Nah man, because you look in the wrong place. The app is web-based. You access it via your web browser, right? You can add it to your home screen or your desktop, like any regular app. Watch, look, I have it on my phone, right? And you can access it or add it to any device, your computer, your tablet, any device.
Well, how about doing that and I can't find it?
All you have to do is open your browser, right? And type mobile.nawasa.gd. And voila, you see?
Just so?
Yes, and you can download it or access it via the web. Once you have a reliable internet connection, right, you can run the app anywhere, anytime.
So, how I adding that to my home screen?
You click on those three dots, right, or your web browser setting, and look for the option to install app or add to home screen. Easy peasy. The Nawasa app is versatile, fast-paced, and always up to date because it's web-based. Once a change is made to the app, it updates automatically, no hassle.
Mobile.nawasa.gd, your customer support companion.
Total is one of the world's largest oil companies with a top quality line of lubricants. Total Lubricants has a full product line from passenger cars, motorcycle, heavy industrial equipment, mining, trucking, agriculture, and manufacturing machines and vehicles. Total Lubricants, winning championships in motorsports, including Formula One and World Rally Championships. Total Lubricants are available at all Rubis service stations, leading automotive shops, and distributed by Huggins.
Imagine
having the home of your dreams. Imagine investing in that piece of property you can call your own. Imagine finally doing that home improvement project you've always been thinking about. It's time to stop imagining and start doing. Let the GUT Credit Union help you take the first step with fantastic rates, affordable repayments, and reduced legal fees. Make the move. Get better terms on your mortgage. Use your home equity to make those dreams a reality. Act now. There's really no place like home. GUT Credit Union. It's where you belong.
When you need your prescription filled or you require non-prescribed medication, supplements, or all your personal needs, visit Gittins Healthcare at locations on Wall Street, Grand Anse, Victoria Street, Grenville, and Central Deputy Street, Wharf. Gittins Healthcare aims to provide an exceptional personalized pharmacy experience. Additionally, children under 5 and adults 55 years and over will enjoy 10% discount on purchases of $20 and over on prescription medication. Stop settling for less. Visit Gittins Healthcare, where your health is our priority.
Here is a little known fact. There is only one place in Grenada that you can get an MRI scan done. That place is Spicile Imaging Center. Yes, Grenada, that's the truth. Other centers could offer you other scans, but Spicile Imaging provides an authentic MRI scan. Here's another little known fact. Spicile Imaging has 3 centers. We operate at Grenville, the Kavanagh, and at the Ocean House, Grand Anse. We provide the widest range of laboratory tests and services. CT scans, x-rays, mammograms, ultrasounds, and a host of other services. We are fully staffed by a team of family doctors and specialists. Call us today at 444-7679. or 406-1500, or visit any of our 3 locations. Spicile Imaging, from seeing the doctor to getting lab tests, scans, and pharmacy services. We are here to take care of you.
Thank you. Welcome back and good evening to you. Welcome to the conversation as we delve into the issue of safety at sea. In case you're just joining us, in studio, Captain Bethel, Mr. Kavanagh, Mr. Ashby, and joining us remotely is the man, Mr. Lararus. We started the conversation highlighting, gentlemen, the importance of safety at sea, and we all agree it is a must, it's of paramount importance. But we've also highlighted the fact that very often, Lararus, we talked about the culture that emanates within our small territories, and very often it can lead to a death. And we're going to get into just certainly that the one thing that comes to mind is that recent incident that led to the loss of life of a young Bell, and certainly our hearts goes out to the family. We continue to say it's a difficult time, no doubt. But the question is, how do we put the pieces together and move on? And so, for the purpose of putting it in tonight's conversation in context, we're just going to go back to that piece that was produced here on the GBN to highlight what happened. Producer?
Vandy Joseph, retelling his story to the media on Tuesday, says he and the deceased Kimon Bell journeyed to Hawk Island and on the return experienced engine problems. And that's when things took a turn for worse.
So the same time I tell him, let me call and get rescue. Come and tell me, nah, I know the problem, I'm going to fix the problem, Vandy, don't worry, we will get through. But same time now, came on and end up fixing the problem in the engine now. And then we start to run up on the airport. We only going up to Grand Anse Beach. We end up making it a light. So I end up telling him, well, but that the code died I don't trawler over there outside the Jomo trawler. He tell me, nah boy, that the Coast Guard. At the same time, he started to slow down. I tell him, cut in Ghanans, go in motor Ghanans, and then we run up on the cruise. As we running up on the cruise now, at the same time, the Coast Guard make a U-turn. And just turn off the lights now and start running coming up to me. So the same time, he slow down now, and I tell him, well, I'm going to put on the phone light. Turn on the phone light now, waving the light as the Coast Guard speeding coming to us. The men just end up running into us.
He claims an officer initially refused to grant him a phone call.
I raised up my head from in the water. I see Bell floating. I said to tell them, man, they kill my brother boy. And the man, when he started to make calls to call some Sarge, I turn around and tell the man, boy, bleeding out in the water, boy, come and take me out in the water. The man, when he hear me in the water, they floating on the boat, holding on. Next 2 minutes, the man pull out a gun and crank it. And telling me, no, come up on the boat. So I telling the man, no, boy, I just get through the man mother. Then the man play, hold him back, and then tell him, come up. And I go up on the boat now, the man end up putting out the gun and then go in the front of the boat and never come.
Maritime lawyer and legal counsel for Bell's family, Anselm Crowden, highlights the guidelines to be followed by the Coast Guard.
Well, those are military vehicles, and they're supposed to be littered. You see any man of war, any Coast Guard traversing the territorial sea of Grenada, even our Coast Guard is supposed to be properly littered at all times when they're traversing the ocean, so that they are identifiable as a military or paramilitary vehicle. And usually they must carry lights. The International Maritime Organization regulations speaks to it. Yachts, you see they have a light at the mast. You must at all times, when at sea at night, that's part of the navigational, International Maritime Navigational Act. You must have your port and starboard minimum lights on, or your deck lights. But if you're a military organization, if you're a Coast Guard or a battleship, well, your deck is always littered with rotating lights as you move.
I am Gerard Joseph for GBN News.
Thank you, Jared, for the piece. Captain Bethel,
yes, sir.
In your initial discourse, you talked about traversing at nights, and we highlight that during the day's one conversation, the nights, the dynamics changes naturally, whether you're on sea or you're on land. Listening to the account given there, listening to the legal representation, a man with your experiences, what's going through your mind? He continued to highlight the need for lights, and I know you started touching on that.
To be quite honest, being a part of, as a navigator, especially at night, it's a ticklish situation, especially when you're doing coastal navigation other than deep sea navigation.
Okay.
Coastal navigation, where you're much closer to shore. Let me specify that. You're gonna see the whole coastline lit up. It's very hard at sometimes to identify a vessel, especially when it's making way, or on the way I should say. That determines when the vessel is in motion, other than when you're doing international navigation, whereby it's just you're on the open ocean. It's easier to detect and identify a vessel. But hence, with me saying that, I must say it have equipments on board that we can use as a part of aid to navigation to help us identify such vessels, small craft, large crafts, even buoys in the water. And as I mentioned, those are just aids to navigation. As my colleague said, the vessel should and shall have a proper lookout.
And when we say vessels, we refer to vessels like the Coast Guard, Mr. Kavanagh?
All vessels.
All vessels.
All vessels shall follow those rules. It does not take away from the Coast Guard or no one's. They must follow those rules and regulations.
Let's talk about the different types of lighting, Mr. Kavanagh, because certainly that's your area of expertise. You provide, you're a specialist in that area and provided equipment and other navigational pieces that's needed. A boat like the Coast Guard, besides the issue of lights, which we're assuming it was carrying, and I'm saying we're assuming that in the context that it is standard, that should be. What are some of the other navigational aids that's on board?
Well, it largely depends on the size of the vessel and the purpose that the vessel is undertaking at that time. For example, small vessels would be required to carry port and starboard.
No, but I'm talking about specifically the Coast Guard in this case.
For Coast Guard, they would have the minimum port and starboard running lights, which indicate which side you're looking at on the vessel. An all-white stern light, which would have at the very least a minimum of 2 nautical mile visibility.
Let's go back. And the lights that you're referring to that indicates which side. Explain to me what those lights look like.
Essentially, it's a red light and a green light.
Right.
So you know when you're looking at a vessel on the side and you see a green light, you know you're looking at a specific side of the vessel. If you see a red light, you know you're looking at a specific side. If you see a white light, you know that you're looking at the back of the vessel, at the stern of the vessel. But a vessel like Coast Guard would also have additional lights. They would have searchlights and strobe lights as well that they can use in various different situations. But as a bare minimum, they would have port, red and green running lights, so you can clearly identify the vessel, and a stern light, which is a white light which can be seen 360 degrees. That's the very minimum.
So Lararus, with that being said, any trained individual should have a reasonable appreciation when they're out at night. What is it that they're seeing on the open sea? Notwithstanding the point that you made of the challenge of being closer to land, where you get in the different types of lights. Lararus. Not with that being said, certainly it goes back to you made reference to the issue of training and the importance of knowing what is it you see on the open ocean under the cover of dark. Lararus?
Yes, well, as I said before, you have to forgive me. I will not comment on an ongoing investigation. But what I will say though, in terms of a safety culture, mariners ought to be risk averse. We must be able to assess risk and apply our navigational skills, our experience, our training to the circumstances at hand. And there's a principle that it is applied in terms of risk. It's called the ALAP principle, keeping risk as low as reasonably practicable. And for persons to apply these principles, you must be aware of your risk. So culture, a safety culture is really critical. And that culture is built upon through training, awareness, and practice, experience. So, and in terms of, you ask a question about application of the rules of the road. The rules apply to all vessels upon the high seas and in all waters connected therewith, navigable by seagoing vessels. So, where the collision regulations are concerned, all vessels that navigate on the high seas and in waters connected with the high seas have to apply those rules.
Captain Bethel made reference to the challenge of when you're doing coastal navigation. Do you agree with him? And if so, do you wish to expand on that and the challenges that it actually poses?
Well, if you delve into the rules, there are rules pertaining to lookout, and Kavanagh mentioned it. It is important to keep a proper lookout. my side by hearing by all means, subject to the prevailing circumstances and conditions. And when you are navigating near shore, particularly in hours of darkness or in restricted visibility, there are interferences from light of vessels and offshore and backscatter of your own lights and lights ashore. So it is important that you differentiate what is a lit vessel and what is your own light, your backscatter of your own lights, or a light ashore. Again, it comes back to being risk averse. You must know where you are and what is the best course of action to avoid any collision where that is concerned. So again, it comes back to training and awareness.
We keep hearing those two terms, and it almost sounds cliche: training and awareness. Captain Bethel, the conversation, I mean, and it's going to be like a revolving door, that question. But we talked about on sea, the culture should be that of being able to assess the risk that is involved. And it calls for the senses, whether it be the lookout and all of these different elements that actually comes into play. You're on the open sea. What should be the protocol? I'm going to come back to Lazarus on that. If in terms of I'm out at sea in the night, something goes wrong with my vessel, what should be the protocol as a captain, as a seaman? I'm talking about across all spheres. The gentleman made a come to him, one of the convicts saying, listen, I can fix it. And they went on to from all indications they did. Is that standard protocol? What would you advise that?
As the regulation clearly states, the rules of the road, it identifies all lights that should at night be exhibit in case of any form of emergency. Even if your vessel is aground, there are certain lights you must exhibit. If there is a collision, well, I will endorse what Lazarus say. You try to avoid a collision at any time. And within the navigational lights rules, you pass each vessel port to port. But if you see a vessel is making collision and there's obstruction, therefore you take the necessary actions to avoid such collision as it is.
Necessary actions?
Correct, all necessary actions.
What would constitute reasonably necessary action as a captain on a vessel, let's say, like a captain on a vessel, what would be considered reasonable? Because at one time he said he got the sense that the vessel in question, the Coast Guard, was coming in their direction.
I won't really debate on that issue because presently that investigation is ongoing.
Right.
And I don't want to debate on that, or
but I want to delve into your history.
Don't let us look in that direction.
But no, I'm talking about in the context of your experience. You're out on the ocean. You see a vessel in the distance. We talk about your training should kick in. What should be the next thing going through my mind?
If it's going to be a collision course or any form of collision, first of all, you radio the vessel, make some sort of communication. At sea, vessels be on standby all the time on channel 16, so you must make communication with that vessel on channel 16. Ask them what is the intentions. Then they would refer to you if they have an issue. Then you would tell them, well, this is your course, this is your speed. They would say the same, so both parties would know the action to be taken within that moment. It also, as I mentioned earlier, it have the distance that you are from the other vessel. We have a CPA, close point of approach, and all of these things is being done on the calculations. So we know exactly how much time we have when we check the vessel's speed and your speed.
And all these equipment that's everyone on board, we reasonably expect that they're trained and they know how to use those equipment.
Yes, any vessel officer should know to use the equipment, because at the end of the day, all of those equipments are just 8 navigations.
Is it possible?
8 navigations are just for the equipments, whereby you have other things on board that can assist.
In your years of experience as a captain, what are the probabilities of an incident like this happening once all the rules are followed?
Once all the rules are followed, 0. It shouldn't happen.
It shouldn't happen.
It should not happen, because at all times, the rules of the road clearly states all vessels shall and must have a proper lookout at all times.
And certainly for a lot of reasons, and I know it's almost begging the question as to what may or may not have been happening. But Mr. Kavanagh, let's talk about the different equipments. There's radar, you talk about, was it CPA?
Yeah.
What are those exactly? And how do they work? It picks up an object, does it give you an alarm, an alert? Captain says, and at what distance?
Well, radar is a technology that's been around since the Second World War. And basically it sends out a signal, it bounces off an object and gives a return. But you have to bear in mind that if you're talking about a wooden fishing boat, you're not going to get any return from a wooden fishing boat, because you don't have enough of a metallic surface which is going to give you a return. The second most commonly used would be a system that we call AIS, or Automatic Identification System. And it's essentially where a vessel is sending a signal. It's basically broadcasting its position, its speed, its course every minute or every 2 minutes or so. But in order for that to be effective in a two-vessel potential collision, then both vessels have to have AIS equipment on board. So if a Coast Guard vessel or a ship or a pleasure yacht or whatever is equipped with this type of equipment, and they're in a close situation with a vessel that's not equipped, then we have no idea what's happening with the other vessel. That's where the lookout comes into play. And it's down to a situation where under any regulation which states that, and the regulations clearly identify situations where, like the rules of the road, where one vessel has the right of way over another.
And that lookout you speak, it almost takes iceberg.
Correct.
That's what he does. That's the rule. Yeah. Iceberg ahead.
Yeah. But the point is that even though the regulations are very clear and they state that who has the right of way in given situations, even if you do have full right of way, the overriding concern is that you must avoid a collision at hand. It's no point in saying, I was in the right, I had the right of way. It's the duty to avoid a collision, and that's on all mariners. It's interesting, Mr. Ashby, because of course you come from a technological background, that while we've made so many advances and we've made leaps and bounds, as Mr. Kavanagh says, if while there's radar, sophisticated equipment on board, if it is dependent on what else is out there, a wooden structure. It's interesting that we've made so many progress, so much of leaps and bounds, that here we are, technology meeting old school, and is that something you see down the line that we can fix from a technological perspective?
Definitely. In fact, that's really the crux of this discussion tonight. Where do we go from here? It is imperative that we look at the situation, if we could sort of go back to it, even though it was not involved in it. If the other craft at least had a flare, something, some sort of lit it up something. And there again, for the small crafts, there are rules of the road too, that the minimum things that they should have. Life jackets, there's some of the flashlights, some of those basic things to navigate the ocean. That's just basic. I mean, so again, that's why it is so important for us to begin to make sure that all vessels, the rules say all vessels have to do it. Otherwise, you cannot traverse the seas. And then when you talk about marine activity at night, then we're talking about a whole new space again. And so it is imperative that when we, that's one of the reasons why it is so important that we begin to speak about the training for persons getting licensed, so that they know the rules of the road. It is like what is going on now. We have persons driving without license on the sea. That is not good. And so that when because Captain Bethel talked about safety at sea. What do you do when the situation? They say it's better to fix it before than after. And it is important that, and I'm so glad that the port and we have this panel of persons with the expertise so that we can address this. So this a situation like that never happens again, or at least to keep it at the minimum.
Is there anything we can do that to have one of these fishing vessels adapted, maybe? And certainly while we get to this juncture in the conversation, the number on the inside, 435-2041. Certainly you can chime in with your questions and queries. Again, reminding you that we are not, the conversation tonight is not going to delve anywhere into the specifics of the ongoing investigation. It is solely intended for educating the general public. I think I'm hearing that we do have a call. Good evening, caller. No, we don't have a call as yet. So we'll take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll open up the lines, and then we'll talk about the conversation. What can we do to adapt these smaller wooden vessels within our country of where we are, we're fishing communities, so that we can minimize, if not reduce, the occasion of such an incident happening again. Beyond the headlines, we'll be right back.
Supporting education. The project for our school is the expansion of the school feeding department and home economics department. Our previous kitchen area has been very small, and sometimes it became congested. Therefore, we would like to say a heartfelt thank you to Grenlec for partnering with us in ensuring that we improve the quality of education that we provide here at Riverside Government School.
Grenlec, energizing our community.
Total is one of the world's largest oil companies with a top quality line of lubricants. Total Lubricants has a full product line from passenger cars, motorcycle, heavy industrial equipment, mining, trucking, agriculture, and manufacturing machines and vehicles. Total Lubricants, winning championships in motorsports, including Formula One and World Rally Championships. Total Lubricants are available at all Rubis service stations, leading automotive shops, and distributed by Huggins.
Let's start the new year on a high, a detox high, because it's detox time again at Nirvana Detox Center and Natural Health Store. Check out our many detox packages starting from $100 or get 15% off on colonic irrigation therapy. Detoxing can help with liver and blood cleansing, weight loss, constipation, acid reflux, kidney stones, heavy metal removal, gas and bloating, and more. Call or WhatsApp us 1231-6642, 448-7115 or 449-7753. Ask about our delivery options. Visit us now. Bruce Street Mall, store number 1208 or Belmont St. George's, close to the Fall Edge area. Our opening hours are Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Nirvana Detox Center and Natural Health Store. Detox, your way to health. These specials ends on March 31st or while stocks last.
When a loved one passes on, we all need the comfort, support, and guidance of a trusted friend. You can rely on LaCour Brothers Funeral Home. We provide a personalized professional service that exceeds all expectations. Our dedicated staff responds to your every need with the greatest detail, ensuring affordability with a variety of options. Our upgraded state-of-the-art facilities, spacious air-conditioned chapel with live internet streaming, a modern, environmentally safe crematorium, the only of its kind on island, private viewing spaces, large on-site repast center, a modern transportation fleet. Join our burial society today and make personalized arrangements for that final moment. As you prepare to enter your loved one into eternal rest, visit or call LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and select a package that brings added comfort to the entire family. LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and Burial Society, continuing a tradition of excellence.
Thank you. Welcome back to the conversation here on Beyond the Headlines. Joseph Cadore, and this evening we're talking the conversation with safety at sea. My guests here, certainly, gentlemen, we've highlighted the fact that there are rules that must be followed. If not, then there is the potential of something unfortunate happening. Lazarus, while you were on the break, we talked about the STC training and the importance of it. And I know you also, you've weighed in on this, the issue of the culture where everybody decides, you know what, let me just jump in a fishing vessel, and go somewhere, and not being prepared enough in terms of training. What's your thoughts? How important is that? And is that a culture that you see something that becomes that is embraced by many seafarers, or they just say, "Que sera, sera"?
Well, Joe, in terms of I have to speak to the regulations. The SCCW is an international convention, as I said. Grenada is a party to it. We're all seafarers serving on international ships. Must be trained. You have the basic safety training, and then you have training for officers and training for ratings. It is, of course, competence based, because persons who take the training have to sit exams, and they also have to have their certificates renewed every 5 years, and the other aspects of the certificates and endorsements that they need to have. Further, the Small Commercial Vessel Code makes provision for boat masters and boat engineers license. Grenada is in the process of ratifying the Small Commercial Vessel Code. As we speak, we have the first draft of the regulations. Once that is okayed by Cabinet, it goes to Parliament to be passed. So there is a reduced standard for small vessel operators operating in around our coastal waters and in the Caribbean, the Caribbean trading area. So there is no substitute for competence at sea. You need people who are trained, who have the experience, who have the qualifications to man seagoing vessel for all the reasons.
We have a caller that is on the line. Good evening, caller.
Good evening to you, Mr. Joseph. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Mr. Joseph, I'm a concerned citizen. I'm looking at your program very carefully, and I would like to let Mr. Bethel know that whenever there's a small craft in the coastline of any island, there should be a port and starboard lookout. That is one of the main things, and that incident, look lookout. Everybody was running on a top speed, no lookout. There has to be a lookout where you say port and starboard, especially on the coastline. In the middle ocean, you normally have either a port, depends on the wind blow, you have a lookout. But in that small craft incident, there should be both lookout, port and starboard. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, but caller, as you heard me say, the vessel must have a lookout. I mentioned earlier, doing coastal navigation, it's much difficult to observe lights, but at all times, vessels should have a proper lookout.
I think we all agreed on that.
Exactly.
Unanimously.
Yep.
We all agreed on that unanimously. On the issue of safety, and we talked about that gray point where technology fails wooden vessels. Is there anything, Donal, that can be done to adapt these small wooden vessels so as to ensure they meet? I mean, Lazarus talked about us, of course, standardizing minimum. At least a minimum. What can be done to assist?
There's some very, very simple and inexpensive solutions that are available to adapt small wooden boats so that they're more visible at night and they're safer. For example, we have available nowadays, we have radar reflectors, which a wooden boat can mount. It's about the size of a basketball, and it has it's sort of octahedral shaped. And it will give a radar return. So if a fast boat equipped with radar is underway at night, they will get a return and they will know that there is something in the way. Relatively inexpensive. I'm talking less than $100.
Why don't you just say cheap?
It is cheap. It is cheap. For me, I think VHF radio is an absolute must because it allows small fishing units to communicate with larger vessels. And sometimes larger vessels who can find it more difficult to maneuver by virtue of their size. Small vessels can be placed in jeopardy. So the simple act of being able to call up a vessel on channel 16 and to announce your intentions and to inquire about the intentions of that other vessel, in many cases that can avoid a disastrous situation. The third item would be life jackets for all crew, because you're going to see in what is largely an open boat, which doesn't have buoyancy chambers or flotation devices. So if the boat is holed in some way or if it meets heavy seas, it could sink. Life jackets for the crew would make a tremendous difference. And imagine if the crew had a VHF radio. When they put out that call on channel 16, it's not just a Coast Guard. Every other vessel around them will receive the same distress call.
Around, in terms of perimeter.
It's a call. At that level in coastal waters, you're probably looking at somewhere between 3 and 5 miles radius.
Right.
So everybody else will receive the distress call and everybody else will be in a position to respond or to relay the message to Coast Guard or hospital authorities or whatever. So life jackets are key, they're important in that respect. The final one I would say, operating at night. Flares are very, very useful because they're very, very bright. Operating during the day, there is a flare which is orange smoke, and you pull the pin, you drop it in the water, and it emits this cloud of dense orange smoke, so it's very, very visible. So people can clearly see. If they see that during the day, they know that there's a vessel in distress.
You see them on movies. That's not camera tricks. That's for real.
That's for real.
It's for real.
Yeah.
It is for real.
So there's some very simple and inexpensive strategies that can be employed, and this doesn't require a huge amount of training either. It just requires people to be familiar with the use of equipment and to understand how to maintain the equipment and when to replace it when it expires and things like that.
A flashlight, Ashby.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to be rocket scientists to figure out how to operate a flashlight. Yes. And you were saying, Captain Bethel, that becomes another life-saving tool that you think all seafarers at least should have on board, these small operators.
Yeah, because larger vessels have the spotlight, the searchlights. So a smaller vessel should, for their safety, have a flashlight on board with them.
You want to say something, Ashby?
No, going back to what we are talking about, it is important that we try to introduce safety, not just for vessels of a certain size, but because what we don't want to do is that a guy just build a boat and just start and just gone in the sea.
And which is part of our culture.
Yeah, and just gone in the sea without, and we assume that who taught him how to navigate the engine, or does he know the rules? So there should be some just basic stuff that you need to know before you jump in a boat, because anything that has to do, has an engine in it, has the responsibility to the convention. Anybody that operates now, if you're in a rowing boat out there, that's okay. But once you decide to put an engine on any vessel and begin to maneuver out in the ocean, there's certain rules of that road that you have to begin to.
So that once you decide to leave land, there are laws that govern how you transport from on the land. Once you go to the sea, there are laws that should kick in, whether you're in an oar boat or you have a motor vehicle, a unit.
A sailing vessel.
Correct. Even
a sailing vessel.
Lazarus, let's come back. Because time is slowly in hand. The question that was going to be asked ultimately, gentlemen, where to from here? What are the learning curves coming out of this incident? And I want to start with you, Lazarus. And there's always a question as to the investigation. Who is conducting the investigation? Is it going to be open, fair, transparent, nothing being sealed? What can you share?
Well, as I said, I can't comment on the status of the investigation. What I can tell you from the Maritime Administration's perspective, our ongoing investigation, the findings of which will be published, because we are supposed to publish those findings, because the purposes of that investigation is to first find out what happened, how it happened, and what lessons can be learned to avoid it from happening in the future. So it is a protocol for maritime safety investigations to be published, and that they publish generally, and it has to be reported to the International Maritime Organization. So to answer your question, I can assure you that there will be lessons learned, and we should take those findings and recommendations going forward, so that we don't have similar incidents in the future.
And I'm certain you would want to give the general public that your unit, your department is separate and follows international laws and is not subject to any legal interference at any level, political or otherwise.
Well, as I said, and I'll repeat, our investigation is clear. It follows the code of casualty investigation, and the purposes of which is to find out what happened. The findings will see what happened. There will be recommendations, and the report, once concluded, will be published, and not just published locally. We have to send the findings and the concluded report also to the International Maritime Organization, and that is shared globally through a platform called GSIS. So, the whole maritime world can look at that and say, okay, these are the findings of this investigation, those are the recommendations, and lessons to be learned.
To be learned, that would come out in time. We have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller.
Yeah, good afternoon, host and callers. Quick question. A small craft has a suspected contraband. The police, the Coast Guard give chase. Is there an established protocol for such chase?
Thank you, caller. Is there a protocol? And I want to make sure that we be very careful on this. I'm not sure whether there's anybody in my panel that is. I don't think there's anybody here that's qualified to even attempt to answer this. We can assume that there is, but certainly call, as you can well appreciate. The panel that sits here is not in a position to assist you with that sort of information. Certainly, the RGPF. And so, together with the Coast Guard, they would be able to tell you specifically what is the protocol, that sort of action. We're here tonight to...
That's above A grade.
Way above. Way above. So that we're here to basically seek and encourage. And I think one of the constants that's coming out of this is the need for training. The need for training.
Can I make a point, Joel, that we did mention the fact that, okay, there's training, but there's also the culture where you build a boat and you put a Yamaha 25 horsepower on it and you go out.
It's what we do.
Okay. And yes, it is. But there is also the concept of a safety culture. And many organizations adopt this process of a safety culture, which is no matter what you do safely. And I think Lazarus referred to that earlier when saying that whenever you go to sea, you must be risk averse. So Keith's point is that in order to reinforce and to introduce a safety culture, then we start off with a structured training program so that gradually over time, almost by osmosis if you like, we'll absorb this whole idea.
It's in the forefront of our minds.
Yeah.
Safety. And what the purpose of what we're trying to do and with the awareness is about upskilling our people.
Correct.
To go out into the sea when they traverse, because we're talking now about the blue economy. A lot of guys even on the trawlers, they go 6 knot, 7 knot. They go for 2 weeks. They are out of Grenada. When they are out there, the guys on the trawler, they are now in international water.
Right.
And now, do they know all the rules? Are their license up to date when they interact with the Coast Guard? And because if something happened to them, they're going to be interacting with the Coast Guard maybe in Venezuela, Tobago, somewhere out there. Now, are they trained? And yes, they may have some experience, but are they up to the Coast Guard may want to find out is your license up to do you have the right equipment on board? Have you have the training and stuff? That's the question that will be asked.
And it's a question that must be asked and answers will be sought. And you cannot separate it. I know there are individuals that are thinking this is our way of life.
Yes.
For those persons in the fishing communities, the Woburn, the Guave, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, which they live their life on the sea.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, it is just unique. If you ever go to PM and you go and you start going, okay, a guy gets up, we go to the bus terminus, we stop a bus, they go up, they jump up on a boat, and they speed across the ocean. But very often, Lazarus, I don't know you would agree with me, with us, that the conversation as it relates to safety is one that should not and cannot be underscored in any way, form, or fashion at any level, whether at the commercial level or just a little homeboy growing up on the bay in Woburn, up in the lands, that built a fishing boat because he has good skills, mad skills, but he grew up on the sea. The question and conversation regarding safety is one, Lazarus, that should be foremost on his mind and his colleagues, parents, families, the entire community.
Well, on the score, you have to do things safely. Seafarers are called seafarers for a reason, because there are perils at sea. So you cannot go in an environment where there is innate peril and you're not safe. It is unwise. So it is important, very important at all levels, that persons venturing at sea are trained, have the awareness of the risk involved, and not just the risk to themselves, but risk to others. because you're not operating in the backyard. The sea has many users and lots of conflict, and you have to resolve those conflicts in your voyages. So it's important that persons are made aware of the perils at sea, made aware of the regulations, including and not limited to the collision regulations, and what other national regulations that may apply, including registration of power-driven vessels according to Cap 249, the Powercraft Act.
Thank you. We have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller. I think we may have lost that caller. Gentlemen, we definitely, time waits on no man, and I was hoping tonight he was going to stop for a moment in time, but it only shows that time keeps on moving. It doesn't wait on us. I think the general tone of the conversation as it relates training, it keeps popping up. It's almost like this revolving door, training, and I can see some people saying, Bethel, of course you can well appreciate, coming from up the islands where the sea is what you do. That's what you do from the time you were born. And there's some people that's probably thinking, why are they trying to take away from my livelihood? All I want to do is just to jump in a fishing boat, go out there and do my do. This is not what this is about, is it?
No, it's not. And you know, as Lazarus can relate to what I'm going to say, we usually say we do it safe or do not do it at all.
Right.
You know, as safety is not a priority.
Do it safe or don't do it at all.
Correct.
Don't do it at all.
But also too, there's a tremendous difference between the sea and the land.
Yeah.
If on land, if I walk out of my bed, I'm going to land onto something. In the sea, if something happens, there's a peril or event at sea. The first thing that happens is that you go down, and you begin to go down. So there's a difference of how you navigate on land as I do on sea. Because so therefore, it is imperative that you learn something about safety at sea, because when the event comes up on you, you cannot go look at a book and say, gee, what do I do now? Right. You should know it before. Yeah. So it's better to get the training before and not after the event happened.
And Bethel did highlight the fact that had they been training, if you train, we don't want to assume that they were not trained. Yeah. For persons that are trained instinctively, something kicks in.
They will kick in. The safety, what you've learned will kick in. Yeah.
As long as you refresh your skills, because these are perishable skills. Right. You can learn and you can be trained, but unless you refresh, and I would suggest at a minimum on an annual basis, drills. You do it over and over again. Then, and I fully get the point that somebody says, I've been fishing all my life, I want to jump in a boat and I want to go and do my thing, and that's admirable, and that's absolutely not a problem. But you may be putting somebody else's life in danger, and this is the key, that if we have a safety culture, then we can probably protect more people, protect everybody.
It's almost the same if you parallel it to getting on board, driving a not any vehicle, being on the nation's roads without a license.
Similar.
Correct. Or being on the road, being intoxicated. Mm-hmm. You're not just putting yourself at risk, but other road users. That same sort of mentality should be adopted. Lazarus, as we wrap, that same sort of mentality should be adopted, and I think it's a conversation that you would agree, Lazarus, that not just start with the adults, but a conversation where we start grooming the next generation to appreciate and respect the ocean. Lazarus?
Well, certainly, and I'm continually doing that because I go to my alma mater every year, Presentation College, and on the career day, I speak to the students on a career at sea, because I'm firmly believing that we cannot employ everybody on this small piece of rock. We speak about the blue economy. We have much more maritime space than we have terrestrial. So last time I checked, 2/3 of the Earth's surface is still covered by water, and over 12 billion tons of goods are moved annually by sea. So there is economic sense in training our population for careers at sea. So I fully endorse it. The earlier we start, the easier for the culture to permeate.
Earlier we start, the easier for it to permeate. Any last few words from you, Captain Bethel?
I think we touch a little bit on everything, and I think my advice to the viewers out there is think and do the right thing. If you get a chance to read the Rules of the Road booklet before you go at sea, go right ahead and see if you could get yourself a copy and just follow those rules.
And I think each and every one of us should allow it, because I think each and every one of us, we know somebody who owns a boat.
Yeah, exactly.
We all know somebody, Donal. So it should be a national conversation, you say, at all levels?
I would think so. Whether you are engaged in the fishing industry as a small fishing unit, or you are a charter vessel, a party boat taking people out around Sculpture Park, or snorkeling in Grand Anse, or whether you have an offshore fishing boat. I think it's all vessels in Grenada should have this conversation about safety and awareness that the more we train for this, the less likely it is we're going to have tragedies in the future.
Keith?
What I'd like to say is that as we have noticed over the last few years that there's more and more people involved in the green economy and the blue economy. And if you go to Peter Martin, go and look at the Kavanagh, you see all this. There's a lot of men are going out, going fishing, and they're not as our grandfathers used to go fishing. They just go into the morning and come back. Some of the guys, when I talk to them, I say, "How long are you going to be out?" "Oh, I'll be back in 2 weeks." Yeah. So they are now going. Guys on the Kavanagh, the boats, they're going on for 2 weeks. I mean, in 2 weeks you can almost circumnavigate the earth. So I mean, they're all there 2 weeks. So therefore, we need to address safety with a lot of these what we call the captains, because a lot of them. And fortunately for us, like I said, that's one of the reasons why I'm glad we have the opportunity to do this program, is because we can do it now at home. You don't have to, the STCW, it could be done at home. You can now come to the Coding Academy and get this done. Before, you had to go to Trinidad, jump on a plane, go to a hotel. The cost was prohibitive. Now, for just a nominal fee, you can now come to the Caribbean Coding Academy.
Let's take advantage of it.
And take advantage of it locally. And then we, Captain Beth, we will talk about some of them. If they don't want to do STCW, there's some safety courses that we can.
It have like the security awareness.
The security awareness courses. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all this, the Academy going to be helping out seafarers with accomplish.
And then also the renewal of certificates.
Yes, exactly.
So guys who have been captains for a while and they expire, so it's like driving out there with an expired license, so they can now come to the academy to get the
We say knowledge is power.
It's power, yes.
Power to change our lives and to some way of vote and ensure that an incident of this together. Well, it's those, I always say, those elements that are within our control in terms of Grenada, the information, the knowledge that we have, it certainly is one that can help us. And again, we say our hearts goes out to the family, the Bell family, in a tragic moment indeed, situation indeed, and we certainly hope that some way, somehow, that the family would be able to find deep within the ability to appreciate the need for change. I mean, very often we become so cultured in certain things that, God forbid, it takes one of these unfortunate incidents for us to jolt us and to fix it. We say, Grenada, the time for change is now. The conversation must begin now. From you, me, there's no need to say, well, I'm not a seagoer. You may know somebody. I know somebody that is out there. Let's start a national conversation. Safety at home, safety on the streets, on the nation's roads, and safety certainly on the open seas. I want to say thanks again to my panel in studio here with me. captain and certified captain, that is Theophilus Bethel. Thank you for being part of this conversation. We say thanks to Mr. Donal. Kavanagh certainly is an owner for Safety Service Limited, and we highlight, as you said, for a relatively economical fee, persons can go out there and ensure they do what they have to do. And for you, Mr. Keith Ashby, understanding we're bridging the gap between the old and the new, and what can be done to embrace it. And we say thanks also to Mr. Lazarus Joseph, and certainly Lazarus, we're looking and waiting with bated breath for that publication, certainly when it comes from your department. We say thanks to you, my dear sir. All the best to you. All the best to you, gentlemen, to all of our listeners and our viewers. From all of us here at the GBN, we say thank you for being part of this conversation right here tonight on Beyond the Headlines. Till another time of day, remind you, join the team in the morning, Blossom and Gary on Good Morning Grenada. And remind you that King of the Grill comes up on the 4th of June at Montrouge, the biggest family fun-filled event on the GBN calendar. It is back in 2022. So long. Good night, everyone.